I was crouched on the balcony, carefully crushing the plastic water bottles flat and tying them with twine. The cardboard boxes had to be broken down and stacked neatly, the old newspapers sorted by type. My 62-year-old back didn't listen to me anymore. Every time I bent over, it felt like a rod was stirring inside my spine, but that little bit of pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. "Mom, are you piling trash on the balcony again?" "It stinks." My daughter-in-law Jessica's voice cut through the air from the living room, sharp as nails on a chalkboard. I quickened my pace, responding softly. "Almost done. This stuff can be sold." "Sold for what? Pennies? It's so embarrassing. What will the neighbors think? That we're abusing you?" Jessica appeared at the balcony door in her slippers. I didn't have to turn around to picture her with her hands on her hips, glaring. I didn't dare mention the $17.25 I'd made from recycling last week, which I used to buy my grandson Caleb a new pencil case. Saying so would only earn me a lecture about being cheap, just like the time I bought him that jacket. "Grandma, my birthday party is about to start. Are you done yet?" Caleb's voice was tinged with impatience. I quickly stacked the last pile of cardboard and wiped my hands on my apron. "All done, sweetie. Grandma's coming." I hurried to my small room, really just a corner of the laundry room sectioned off with a curtain, and retrieved the carefully wrapped box from under my pillow. Inside was a pair of brand-name sneakers I had saved up for over 3 months to buy, the same model Caleb had seen in a TV commercial and called "So Cool." $350. It was an amount I could never save up just from collecting recyclables. In the end, I had to dip into my meager pension. The living room was already crowded with Caleb's friends. Colorful balloons and a happy birthday banner were strung across the ceiling. I looked down at my own faded navy blue jacket and hesitated, unsure if I should squeeze in among the group of brightly dressed children. "Mom, what are you just standing there for?" "My son," Michael said as he came out of the kitchen with the cake. He glanced at me. "Go help Jessica with the drinks." Okay, I nodded. But first, I walked toward my grandson, who was the center of attention. "Caleb, Grandma got you a present." Caleb took the box, unwrapping it under the curious gazes of his friends. His eyes lit up when he saw the shoebox logo, but his expression fell the moment he opened it. "Grandma, this is last year's model. Nobody wears these anymore." He tossed the box onto the sofa and turned to his friends. "I'm having my mom buy me the new ones with the LED lights. They're coming next week." The children let out envious gasps. While I stood there, my hands still frozen in the gesture of giving a gift, Michael walked over, picked up the shoebox, and looked at the price tag. He frowned. "Mom, why would you spend this kind of money? He has plenty of shoes." I opened my mouth to say something, but I heard Jessica call from the kitchen, "Mom, the drinks are going to spill." I silently put the shoebox down and walked to the kitchen. Passing the large mirror in the hallway, I saw the small, frail old woman inside it. Her graying hair was held back with the cheapest black barrette, and the lines on her face seemed to hold the permanent grime of the kitchen. My hands still had red marks from tying the twine earlier. In this lavishly decorated condo, I felt like an extra who had wandered onto the wrong set. In the kitchen, Jessica was busy placing paper cups on a tray. Without looking up, she said, "Take these out, and be careful not to spill. And by the way, get rid of that junk of yours. The building management is coming to inspect the fire escape tomorrow." I knew she meant the few boxes of old books and jars I kept in the stairwell. I answered quietly and picked up the heavy tray. The party was in full swing, the children's laughter nearly loud enough to lift the roof. I stood in a corner, watching Michael and Jessica flank Caleb, helping him open presents, take pictures, and cut the cake. The gifts were all beautifully wrapped: the latest PlayStation, a designer backpack, a limited edition football jersey. My pair of sneakers lay forgotten in the corner of the sofa, much like myself. When no one was looking, I slipped back into the kitchen and took out a small pot from the back of a cabinet. Every year on Caleb's birthday, I made him a bowl of chicken noodle soup, a tradition passed down from my own grandmother. I had secretly made the dough last night, and the broth was simmered with dried scallops and shrimp. I knew Jessica would say it was unhealthy, but it was one of the few things I could pass down to my grandson. By the time the soup was ready, the party was winding down. I carried the carefully prepared bowl into the living room. A few parents were there to pick up their kids. Caleb was sitting in a pile of gifts, excitedly playing with his new toys. "Caleb, come on. Grandma made you some soup." I carefully placed the bowl on the coffee table, afraid of spilling a single drop. "What's that?" Caleb looked up and wrinkled his nose. "I don't want that. I'm stuffed from all the cake and fried chicken. Just try one bite. It's from Grandma's heart," I said, picking up the spoon, wanting to feed him. "No!" Caleb suddenly raised his voice. A few kids who hadn't left yet turned to look. A mischievous boy started chanting, "Caleb's grandma is so old-fashioned. She still makes stuff like that." The children burst out laughing. Caleb's face turned bright red. He shot up from his seat and screamed at me. "Get out! This isn't your house!" The air seemed to freeze. My hand, holding the bowl of soup, began to tremble. The noodles quivered in the broth, just like my vision at that moment. I looked at Michael, but he was staring down at his phone, scrolling, as if he hadn't heard his son. Jessica was at the door saying goodbye to the last guests, and when she glanced back, there was even a hint of a smile on her face. After the last guest left, Jessica walked over and threw a black trash bag at me. "Did you hear him? Pack up all this junk of yours and get out." She pointed to the corner where my recyclables were still waiting to be put away. Having this trash piled up in the house day after day is disgusting. I mechanically took the trash bag and bent down to start gathering the bottles and cans I had so carefully sorted. In the background, I could hear the laughter of their family of 3. Michael was asking Caleb which gift he liked best. Jessica said she would take him to buy a matching tracksuit next week. That night, lying on my folding cot in the small storage room, I listened to the sounds of laughter and joy coming from the master bedroom next door, and my tears silently soaked the pillow. I remembered over 20 years ago, when Michael's father had just passed away. I worked at the auto plant during the day and sewed clothes for people at night, just to put him through school. I remembered him saying at his wedding, "Mom, I'll take care of you from now on." Moved, I sold my old house to help them with the down payment. I remembered when Caleb was born, holding that tiny bundle in my arms, vowing to give him the very best of everything. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I quietly got up. From the deepest part of a drawer, I took out a bank card. It was for the education fund I had started for Caleb when he was born. Every month, I saved a little from my pension and deposited it. Over 10 years, combined with the money my husband had left me, it had grown to over $120,000. I had planned to give it to him as a surprise when he went to college. I wiped my tears and made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to the bank. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I was awake. The storage room had no windows, but my internal clock had long since adapted. I could accurately find my clothes on the small stool in the darkness. I dressed quietly, afraid of waking my son's family in the next room. The living room still smelled of last night's party, the sweet scent of frosting, greasy fried chicken, and spilled soda. I silently tidied the messy coffee table, rewrapped the rejected sneakers, and tucked them away in my storage room. Maybe someday my grandson would change his mind. At 7 o'clock sharp, I made a pot of oatmeal, fried 3 eggs over easy, and mixed a small bowl of fruit salad, the breakfast combination Michael had loved since he was a child. After I was done, I left a note saying I was going to the farmer's market and quietly left the apartment. The bank didn't open until 9 o'clock, so I sat on a bench in a nearby park for 2 hours. The early spring wind was still a bit sharp. I tucked my hands into my sleeves and watched the morning joggers come and go. A young couple passed by with a stroller. The wife carefully tucked the baby's blanket in, and the husband gently wiped a bead of sweat from his wife's forehead. The scene was like a fine needle pricking my heart. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I looked up to see a middle-aged man in a bank uniform standing in front of me. His name tag read, Mark Peterson, personal banker. "I'm fine, thank you." I managed to smile. "I saw you've been sitting here for a while, and it's still cold out. Would you like to wait inside our lobby?" He pointed to the bank across the street. We turned the heat on at 8:30. I then realized my fingers were red from the cold. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded and followed him across the street. The bank lobby was indeed much warmer. Mark poured me a cup of hot water and brought me a newspaper. "What can I help you with today? I can get your ticket for you in advance." "I want to close a college savings account," I said, pulling the slightly worn bank card from my pocket. Mark took the card and, after looking it up on his computer, his expression changed to one of surprise. "Mrs. Reed, this is the education fund account in your name. It's been active for 10 years. If you close it now, you'll lose some of the accrued interest. Besides, the beneficiary, Caleb Reed, is still a minor." "I know," I interrupted him. "I just want to close it." Mark seemed to want to say more, but in the end, he just nodded. "All right, I'll prepare the paperwork for you. However, for a premature withdrawal of this size, it requires the branch manager's signature. It might take a little while." While I waited, my phone rang 3 times. The first call was from Michael, asking if I'd be home for lunch. The second was from Jessica, saying the building manager was coming for an inspection today and telling me to hurry back and clean up. The third was from Caleb, who immediately asked me to buy him the newest video game cartridge. I handled each of them, saying I had an errand to run and would be home later. After hanging up, I noticed Mark looking at me thoughtfully. "Mrs. Reed, are you sure you want to close this account?" he asked in a low voice. "I see you've made deposits every single month, rain or shine. The current balance is over $120,000. My hand trembled slightly. That money included my late husband's life insurance, my pension from all these years, and every penny I'd saved from recycling. Every time I made a deposit, I imagined the look of surprise on Caleb's face on the day he got into college, when I would hand him this card. I'm sure I heard my own voice, unusually firm. Signing, confirming, transferring, the whole process was finished by almost 11 o'clock. As Mark handed me the transfer receipt in an envelope, he hesitated. "Mrs. Reed, if you ever need any financial advice, you can always come to me. Our bank has programs specifically for seniors." "Thank you," I said, cutting off his sales pitch as I took the envelope. "But I won't be needing that." Walking out of the bank, the sunlight was so bright it hurt my eyes. I stood on the steps, momentarily unsure of where to go. Home? That storage room could no longer be called a home. Go shopping? Besides the $120,000 I had just transferred, I hadn't even brought enough money to buy a cup of tea. "Eleanor? Is that you, Eleanor Reed?" I turned my head and saw a white-haired old woman waving at me. She was pushing a shopping cart full of groceries and walked over with a wide smile. "Carol?" I recognized her. We used to be old neighbors, living in the same building before the neighborhood was gentrified. "It really is you," Carol exclaimed, grabbing my hand warmly. "I thought it looked like you from a distance, but I wasn't sure. Where have you been all these years? I heard you moved in with your son." I nodded, not knowing where to begin. But Carol had already started talking. "Oh, I just moved to this area last month. My son bought me a condo in a retirement community. Do you remember old Mr. Roberts? The one from the old neighborhood association? He lives around here too. We started a seniors book club. We meet every Wednesday. Do you want to come?" My first instinct was to refuse. Michael and Jessica hated it when I participated in what they called those silly activities, saying it was undignified. But the words that came out were, "Yes, I'd like that." Carol happily jotted down my number and insisted on giving me a bag of apples she had just bought. "The book club is this Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the second floor of the community center. You have to come." Then she lowered her voice. "A lot of us ladies there. Well, we get a lot of grief at home. We all look out for each other." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe Carol had seen right through my situation. As we parted, she suddenly asked, "Eleanor, do you still do your embroidery? I remember your work was just beautiful." I shook my head. Those needles and silk threads had been thrown out long ago by Jessica, who called them space-wasting junk. It was almost noon when I got back to the apartment. As soon as I walked in, I could feel the tense atmosphere. Michael was sitting on the sofa with a dark expression. Jessica was clattering pots and pans in the kitchen, and Caleb had locked himself in his room, the sound of his video games blasting through the door. "Mom, where have you been?" Michael put down his phone, his tone unfriendly. "I went to the market, and then I had to stop by the bank." I kept my head down as I changed my shoes, avoiding his gaze. "The bank?" Michael's voice suddenly rose. "Did you touch Caleb's education fund?" I shot my head up, wondering how he could possibly know. The text alerts for that card were linked to my old flip phone. Jessica rushed out of the kitchen, still holding a spatula dripping with soy sauce. The bank just called to confirm a large transfer. They said $120,000 was moved from the education fund account. That's Caleb's money. What right do you have to touch it? So that was it. I clutched the envelope in my bag and suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of calm. That is my money, I said, word by word. I deposited every single cent. Michael stood up and walked over to me. Mom, what are you talking about? Wasn't that money supposed to be for Caleb's college? Yes, that was the plan, I said, looking directly into my son's eyes. But that was on the condition that this was my home, and Caleb was my grandson. The air was still for a few seconds before Jessica's expression suddenly changed. She forced an exaggerated smile. Mom, don't misunderstand. Caleb was just overly excited yesterday. He didn't mean what he said. You raised him. How could he not see you as his grandmother? She then shouted toward the bedroom. Caleb, come out and apologize to your grandma. Caleb reluctantly emerged, his eyes still glued to his phone screen. Sorry, Grandma. My friends were over yesterday, you know. I had to save face. I looked at these three familiar yet strange faces and suddenly felt incredibly weary. I'm a little tired. I'm going to rest. I walked around them toward my storage room. The moment I closed the door, I heard Jessica's hushed voice. Michael, do something. Quick. That's over $100,000. What's the rush? The money's not going anywhere, Michael's voice was calculating. Just humor her for now. We'll talk her into transferring it back later. I sat on the edge of my cot and pulled out the photo of my late husband from under my pillow. Honey, I whispered, did I do the wrong thing? In the picture, he was still young, with a gentle smile, but he couldn't give me an answer. In the afternoon, Sarah Jenkins, the community outreach coordinator, made a surprise visit to promote senior citizens' rights. Michael and Jessica had to put on smiling faces, serving her tea and water. Sarah was a capable woman in her 40s who spoke directly. Our community is promoting activities to respect and care for the elderly, with a special focus on the living conditions of seniors who live with their children. She handed me a business card. Mrs. Reed, if you need anything at all, you can call this number. It's answered 24 hours a day. Jessica immediately chimed in. Oh, don't you worry, Miss Jenkins. We take wonderful care of my mother-in-law. We gave her a big, south-facing room, and we cook all sorts of special meals for her. I watched her lie without blinking, thinking of the so-called big, south-facing room that was actually a converted laundry porch, freezing in the winter and sweltering in the summer, without even a proper bed. Sarah gave me a meaningful look, and as she was leaving, she discreetly slipped a small piece of paper into my hand. After they saw her out, I made an excuse to take out the trash. Downstairs, I unfolded the paper. It read, If you need help, the community has a temporary shelter. I clutched the note in my hand, suddenly realizing that my situation was obvious to any outsider. On Wednesday afternoon, I told Jessica I was going to the supermarket and quietly made my way to the community center. Pushing open the door to the book club room, I was surprised to find a dozen or so seniors inside, deep in a lively discussion. Eleanor. Carol saw me first and hurried over to take my hand. Everyone, this is the Eleanor I'm always telling you about. Her embroidery is absolutely stunning. I was pulled into the center of the group, feeling lost. Just then, an elegant older woman with gold-rimmed glasses stood up and extended her hand to me. I'm Catherine Bishop. I was a high school English teacher before I retired. Welcome to our book club. Her hand was warm and dry, and she squeezed mine with a gentle force, as if transferring some kind of strength. I noticed a book on elder psychology in front of her, its pages filled with notes. The topic of the book club was how to build healthy intergenerational relationships. At first, I just listened quietly, but as the discussion deepened and I heard everyone share their own stories, my eyes began to well up. My daughter-in-law treats me like a free nanny. All the childcare and housework falls on me, and she still complains I don't do it right, said a woman with a full head of silver hair, wiping her tears. My son took my pension card, saying he'd manage it for me. Now he only gives me $500 a month for spending money, another elderly gentleman said indignantly. Catherine gently tapped the table. Everyone, let's not just stop at complaining. We need to think about why this is happening and how we can protect our own rights. She passed out a stack of papers. These are the key points of the elder abuse prevention laws that I've compiled. We need to know that the law is on our side. I took the papers. The clauses highlighted in red pen were particularly striking. Seniors have the right to manage and dispose of their personal property by law, and no organization or individual may interfere. Guardians or caregivers may not, for any reason, force an elderly person to move to substandard housing. Eleanor, Carol nudged my arm. Why don't you tell us your story? Encouraged by the group's supportive gazes, I haltingly recounted my experiences over the years. How I had worked tirelessly to raise Michael. How I sold my old house to help him get married. How I took on all the household chores after my grandson was born, only to be met with disdain. When I got to the part about closing the education fund yesterday, Catherine suddenly slammed her hand on the table. Good for you. That was the first step in reclaiming your dignity. I was stunned. In 30 years, it was the first time anyone had told me I had done something right. After the book club ended, Catherine asked me to stay behind. Eleanor, I run a craft workshop, and I'm looking for someone to teach traditional embroidery. Would you be interested? There's a teaching fee. I instinctively shook my head. I haven't touched a needle and thread in a long time. And at home? It's all right, Catherine smiled knowingly. You can think about it. Same time next week. I'll wait for your answer. On the way home, my steps felt much lighter, but that feeling vanished the moment I pushed open the front door. Where have you been? Michael was sitting in the living room, his face dark. The supermarket? Where are the groceries? I then remembered my lie and mumbled, I didn't see anything I needed. Jessica came out of the bedroom, her expression sour. Mom, did you go to one of those senior events? Miss Jenkins from the community center called and said she saw you there. My heart tightened. I didn't expect to be found out so quickly. Those places are just scams to cheat old people out of their money. Michael raised his voice. If you're so bored, why can't you just watch TV at home? Caleb chimed in. My friend's grandma got tricked into buying supplements. She spent thousands of dollars. I silently walked toward the storage room, but was blocked by Michael. Mom, what are you planning to do with that money? I haven't decided yet, I said calmly. If you ask me, the best thing to do is put it back into the education fund, Michael said persuasively. The interest is high, and there are tax benefits. I'll think about it. I closed the door, shutting out their nagging. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house became strangely delicate. Michael and Jessica stopped ordering me around and even helped with some chores. Caleb would occasionally come and ask for help with his homework, though I knew his parents had put him up to it. On Friday night, Carol called unexpectedly. She said her husband had fallen, and her son and daughter-in-law were both out of town on business. She asked if I could come help. I agreed without a second thought, quickly told Michael I was leaving, and headed out. Carol's place was in the next building over. Her husband was in bed with a large bump on his forehead. Carol and I put an ice pack on it, gave him his medicine, and were busy until after 10 o'clock at night. As I was leaving, Carol held my hand with tears in her eyes. Eleanor, thank you so much for today. At my age, I really didn't know what I would have done. Call me anytime you need help, I said, patting her back. It was almost 11 o'clock when I got home. The moment I walked in, I was stunned by the scene before me. Michael, Jessica, and Caleb were all sitting in the living room, their faces like stone. Mom, so you decided to come back, Jessica said sarcastically. We were about to call the police. I was helping Carol. Her husband fell and hurt himself, I explained. Carol? The one who organizes that book club? Michael sneered. Since when did you two become so close? Caleb added fuel to the fire. Grandma, are you abandoning us? I stood there, suddenly feeling the world spin. The scene before me began to warp, and Michael's voice seemed to come from far away. Mom? Mom? What's wrong? Then there was only darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Michael was by the window, on the phone. The doctor said it was a minor stroke. Yeah, she needs to be observed for a few days. Money isn't a problem. The old woman just cashed out over $100,000. Seeing I was awake, he quickly hung up and forced a smile. Mom, how are you feeling? I opened my mouth, but my face felt numb on one side, and my speech was slurred. I'm fine. After an examination, the doctor spoke gravely to Michael. The patient is showing symptoms of a mild stroke and needs absolute rest. Emotional distress is a trigger. You family members need to be more caring and not agitate her. Michael readily agreed, but after the doctor left, he complained. See, Mom? You're getting sick is such bad timing. I was up for a promotion at work, and now I have to take time off to look after you. Jessica came in with a fruit basket, and her first words were, Mom, the hospital bills will have to come out of your money. We're a little tight on cash right now. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. On my third day in the hospital, a new patient was moved into the bed next to mine. She was an elderly woman in her 70s named Dorothy. She had a broken bone from being pushed down by her son. My no-good son wanted to sell my house, Dorothy whispered to me when the nurse was gone. I refused, so he got physical. Thank goodness a neighbor called the police. I was shocked. How could he do that? Oh, honey. There are a lot of kids like that these days. Dorothy sighed. I heard you got sick because your grandson yelled at you. I nodded, suddenly feeling that my own ordeal wasn't so unbearable after all. Listen, sister, at our age, we have to live for ourselves a little. Dorothy patted my hand. I'll die before I let him sell that house. When I get out of here, I'm going straight to a lawyer to draw up a will. I'll donate it to charity before I leave a dime for that monster. Her words were like a beam of light cutting through my muddled thoughts. She was right. I had worked hard my whole life. Why couldn't I live for myself for a few days? On the day of my discharge, the doctor repeatedly warned me to rest and avoid emotional stress. Michael promised profusely, but the moment we were out the door, he was complaining about how expensive the parking was. When we got home, I found my storage room had been completely ransacked. They had obviously been looking for the bank card with the $120,000. Mom, where did you put the card? Let me keep it for you so you don't lose it, Jessica said with false sincerity. I'll keep it myself, I answered curtly, clutching my purse to my chest. That night, when they weren't looking, I sewed the bank card into the lining of my quilted winter coat. My husband had bought it for me 10 years ago. They thought it was old-fashioned and never bothered to touch it. Lying in bed, feeling the rough fabric of the coat, I made a decision. Next Wednesday, I was going to tell Catherine that I would teach that embroidery class. The first week after my discharge, I used my health as an excuse to stay in the storage room most of the day. At first, Michael and Jessica feigned concern, but once they saw I was mostly fine, they reverted to their old ways. The only difference was they no longer searched my things openly, but did it secretly when I was in the shower or out of the house. Wednesday arrived quickly. After lunch, I told Jessica I had a follow-up appointment at the hospital and left. The sun was lovely and warm. I made a special detour to a flower shop and used the spare change I kept hidden in my shoe to buy a small bouquet of baby's breath. It was a gift to myself for my new life. The community center was especially lively today. A health seminar for seniors was being held in the main hall, and in the second-floor craft room, 7 or 8 students were already seated. When Catherine saw me, her eyes lit up. "Eleanor, you came." I nodded, feeling a bit awkward as I stood at the front of the room. Catherine introduced me to the class. "Everyone, this is the Mrs. Eleanor Reed I told you about. She's an expert in various traditional embroidery techniques, and today she's here to teach us some basic stitches." The students applauded. Most of them were women in their 50s and 60s, but there were also 2 young women who said they were learning the craft to open an online shop. Looking at their eager faces, I suddenly felt less nervous. "Today, we'll learn the simplest stitch, the running stitch," I said, taking out the embroidery hoops and fabric squares that Catherine had prepared for me. The class went more smoothly than I had imagined. Although my right hand was still a little stiff, decades of muscle memory came back quickly. I demonstrated how to thread the needle, tie a knot, and move the needle through the fabric. The students were very attentive. One of the young women, named Linda, even recorded the entire process on her phone. "Mrs. Reed, you're so skilled," one student exclaimed, holding up her own crooked work. "Mine looks like a worm crawled across it." Everyone laughed. I couldn't help but smile, too, as I took her fabric and corrected a few stitches. You see, the stitches need to be even, and the tension has to be consistent. The 2-hour class flew by. The students were reluctant to leave, asking when the next class would be. Catherine took the opportunity to announce, "From now on, Mrs. Reed will be here to teach every Wednesday afternoon." As I was leaving, Catherine slipped an envelope into my hand. "This is your fee for today's class. Don't refuse. You earned it." I felt the thick envelope, and my nose tingled. It had been so many years. For the first time, I was earning money with my own skill, not by collecting recyclables or skimping on my pension. On the way home, I stopped by a small bookstore and used the money I had just earned to buy a guidebook on elder rights law. The cashier was a kind-looking old woman. Seeing the book I was buying, she smiled knowingly. "That's a good book, dear. We seniors need to know our rights." I smiled and nodded, carefully hiding the book in my grocery tote. It was almost 5 o'clock when I got home. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. Jessica was on the sofa with a few magazines spread out in front of her. Michael was smoking on the balcony with a dark look on his face, and Caleb was slamming his bedroom door loud enough to shake the walls. "Mom, where have you been?" Jessica put down her magazine, her voice sickly sweet. "We were worried sick." "A follow-up at the hospital," I answered briefly, heading toward the kitchen with my tote bag. "Really?" Jessica stood up and followed me. "Then how come you didn't bring back any medicine?" Suddenly, she snatched the tote bag from my hand. "What's this?" The book on elder rights law fell out, along with the slightly wilted bouquet of baby's breath. "Aha. So you lied about going to the hospital to attend those ridiculous activities," Jessica's voice rose sharply. "Buying books, buying flowers. You're really living it up, aren't you?" Michael came over, drawn by the noise. He picked up the book and flipped through it, his face growing even darker. "Mom, what is this? Are we abusing you? Are you planning to sue us?" I stood there and suddenly felt no fear. I just wanted to learn a little about the law. "Learn what law?" Michael threw the book on the floor. "Have you been brainwashed by those people? Are they after your $100,000? Caleb peeked out of his room. "Grandma, are you abandoning us?" I looked at my grandson's innocent face, and my heart ached. But then I remembered him telling me to get out, and my resolve hardened. "I just want to have a life of my own." "A life of your own?" Jessica sneered. "You eat our food, you live in our house, and you want a life of your own?" Her words stabbed me like a knife. I took a deep breath and turned toward the storage room, but Michael blocked my way. "Mom, let's get this straight. That money, what are you going to do with it?" "That is my money, and I have the right to decide how to use it," I said, looking my son directly in the eye, my voice surprisingly calm. "Your money?" Michael's face twisted. "You've eaten my food and lived in my house for all these years, and now you're talking about your money?" Jessica added fuel to the fire. "Michael, isn't your company having financial trouble? If you could just use that money—" "Shut up," Michael yelled at her. He turned back to me. "Mom, I'm not after your money. But just think, Caleb is starting middle school soon. Do you know how expensive houses are in a good school district? Do you really want to see your grandson lose out at the starting line?" I looked at my son's familiar yet alien face and suddenly found it laughable. 30 years ago, I had put him through school on a salary of $38 a month, not even willing to buy myself a decent pair of shoes. Now he thought that not living in a top school district was losing at the starting line. "I'll think about it." I repeated the line I had said countless times, walked past them, and went into my room. Closing the door, I collapsed onto the cot, my hands shaking violently. But strangely, this time it wasn't out of fear or sadness, but an inexplicable excitement. Today at the craft class, the students had called me Mrs. Reed with genuine respect. The old woman at the bookstore had given me a knowing smile. Even just now, facing my son and daughter-in-law's accusations, I had managed to calmly talk back. All of it gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I pulled a small box from under the mattress. Inside were my late husband's belongings, a faded American flag pin, a photo of us when we were young, and the note he wrote me before he passed away. Eleanor, live a good life. In the photo, we were standing in front of our old house. I was holding a 3-year-old Michael in my arms, and he was smiling so happily. We were poor then, but at least we had respect and love for each other. Outside the door, the sound of Michael and Jessica arguing broke my reverie. It's all your fault, being so harsh with her. Now the 100,000 is gone, Michael's voice accused. My fault? Why don't you talk about your own ungrateful mother? She lives off us, has all that money, and won't help out. Jessica's shrill voice replied. Shh, keep it down, she can hear you. So what if she hears? I'm not afraid of her. I shook my head with a sad smile and took out the money I earned today. $50. To Michael and Jessica, it wasn't even enough for a single dinner out, but to me, it was the start of a new life. The next morning, I slipped out of the house before they woke up. Sarah Jenkins from the community center had asked to meet me at 9 o'clock to talk about the independent living support program for seniors. Sarah's office was simple and bright. She poured me a cup of tea and got straight to the point. Mrs. Reed, I spoke with Catherine Bishop about your situation. Have you considered moving out on your own? The teacup in my hand trembled. I don't have the money to buy a place. Not to buy, Sarah said, pulling out a folder. The city has a rental assistance program for seniors who are victims of domestic abuse. Your situation absolutely qualifies. Domestic abuse? I was taken aback. In my mind, only something like what happened to Dorothy being beaten until a bone broke counted as abuse. But Sarah pointed to the definition in the brochure. Verbal insults, financial control, restriction of personal freedom, all of these count. Her words made me think of Jessica telling me to get out, of Michael holding onto my pension card, of them forbidding me from attending community activities. I'll think about it, I finally said. Sarah didn't push. She just gave me more brochures and contact information. You can call me anytime. On the way home, I detoured to the neighborhood where my old house used to be. It had long since been demolished and replaced by a high-end shopping mall. Standing in the bustling plaza, I realized with stark clarity that my home had ceased to exist 10 years ago when I sold that house. That storage room was merely a place to stay. It was almost noon when I got home. The moment I walked in, Jessica yelled at me, "Mom, where have you been?" Caleb got into trouble at school. The teacher wants to see a parent. It turned out Caleb had pushed a classmate during gym class, and the other child had scraped his knee. Since Jessica and Michael both had to work, the task naturally fell to me. You'll have to pay the medical bills, Jessica said matter-of-factly. We're tight on cash right now. I nodded silently, thinking I would have to dip into my meager savings again. But this time, I didn't just swallow my anger as usual. I'll go, but you have to promise me one thing. What is it? Jessica asked warily. From now on, every Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to the community center to teach my craft class. I've already promised them, and I can't go back on my word. Jessica and Michael exchanged a look and reluctantly agreed. Fine, but don't let it interfere with your chores here. That afternoon, I went to the school and settled Caleb's dispute. The other parent was reasonable enough and accepted $500 for the medical expenses. On the way back, Caleb was unusually quiet. "Grandma," he said suddenly as we were nearing home, "do Mom and Dad really want your money?" I was startled. "Who told you that?" "I heard them arguing last night. Dad said if he couldn't get the money, he would get laid off. Mom said if we don't get a house in a better school district, I'll have to go to a bad school," Caleb said, looking down. "Grandma, I don't want a house in a better school district. Please don't give them the money, okay?" Tears welled in my eyes. I knelt down and hugged my grandson. "Caleb, money isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that we learn to respect others and to respect ourselves." Caleb nodded, though it was clear he didn't fully understand. In that moment, I made a silent vow. No matter what happened, I would make sure my grandson understood that a person's dignity is more important than money. On Saturday morning, while my son's family was still sleeping in, I quietly left the house. Catherine had arranged for me to see a senior living apartment that a friend of hers recommended. The complex was on the outskirts of the city. Though a bit remote, the environment was peaceful and green. 3 small buildings formed a courtyard with a beautifully maintained garden in the center. We were looking at a studio apartment on the first floor, about 200 square feet, with a private bathroom and a small kitchenette. The monthly rent was $1,500, utilities included. Since you were referred by the Seniors Association, I can offer it to you for $1,200, the landlady, a kind middle-aged woman, said. I looked around at the simple furniture, the bright window, and the framed cross-stitch art on the wall. It was modest, but it was a world away from that storage room. Are all the residents seniors here? I asked. Most of them, the landlady said with a knowing look. A few have children living out of state, and a couple of others are in a situation similar to yours, wanting their own space. Catherine nudged my arm. Eleanor, think about it. It's not far from the community center. I can give you a ride to your class every Wednesday. I felt the money I had saved up over the past few months in my pocket income from my craft class, plus what I'd saved from recycling. It totaled just over $6,000, enough for 5 months' rent. I'll think about it some more, I said, but my mind was already made up. On the way back, Catherine told me the community was hosting a craft exhibition next month and asked if I would be willing to participate. My work isn't good enough for that, is it? I hesitated. Of course it is. The students were amazed when they saw photos of your cardinal and dogwood tree embroidery. I had spent 6 months on that piece. I originally intended to give it to Michael for his birthday, but Jessica had called it old-fashioned, so it had been sitting at the bottom of a box ever since. All right, I'll give it a try, I promised. It was almost noon when I got home. As I walked in, I heard Michael on the phone, speaking in a low, subservient tone. Yes, Mr. Thompson, just give me 1 more week. Yes, the investment capital is about to come through. Seeing me, he quickly hung up, his face dark. Mom, where were you? Just out for a walk, I answered briefly, heading to the kitchen to start lunch. Michael followed me in. Mom, the company is having some trouble lately, he began, wringing his hands, his eyes darting around. If I can't bring in a new investment this month, there might be layoffs. I silently washed the vegetables, not responding. Mom, I was wondering if you could lend me that money to get through this. He finally spit it out. I'll write you an IOU with bank interest. I turned off the faucet and looked at my son's familiar yet strange face. Michael, it's not that I won't help you, but this is the last of my savings. I have to keep it for my own retirement. Retirement? Michael's voice suddenly rose. Aren't I taking care of you? Do you have so little faith in your own son? Jessica rushed in, drawn by the noise. What is it? Why are you shouting so early in the day? Michael stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Jessica shot me a glare and followed him. I stood there, listening to their muffled argument, the kitchen knife in my hand trembling slightly. That old woman is getting more and more out of line, I heard Jessica say. Living off us, and she won't even help out with the money. Shh. Keep it down. I'm working on it. Working on what? If you ask me, we should just pack up her things and send her to a nursing home. The condo is in our name, anyway. My hand suddenly stopped trembling. So, they had already been thinking about this. Lunch was unusually quiet. Only Caleb chattered away about school, temporarily breaking the tension. After the meal, I made an excuse to take out the trash and sat on a park bench for a long time. The April sun was warm but not harsh, shining on my wrinkled hands. These hands had once toiled day and night at the factory to send my son to school, had sewn countless tiny clothes for my grandson. Could they now embroider a new life for myself? When I returned, I found my storage room had been ransacked again. They were clearly looking for the bank card. Fortunately, I was prepared. I had hidden the card in the lining of my quilted coat, and that coat was on my back right now. That night, I tossed and turned, the threat of the nursing home echoing in my ears. I had to act faster. The next morning, I called Sarah Jenkins. Miss Jenkins, about that rental assistance, I'd like to apply. Sarah was very supportive and asked me to come to her office that afternoon. When we met, she explained the policy in detail. Seniors over 60 who are victims of domestic abuse can apply for a monthly rental subsidy of $800 for up to 2 years. Your situation fully qualifies. She handed me an application form. You just need to provide your ID, proof of residence, and a written statement of your situation. I hesitated. Won't this cause a huge scene? Mrs. Reed, Sarah said seriously, there is no shame in protecting your legal rights. Think about it. If your daughter were being treated this way by her in-laws, what would you tell her to do? Her words reminded me of my own mother, who, on her deathbed 30 years ago, held my hand and said, Eleanor, a woman has to be strong. Don't let people bully you. Unfortunately, over the years, I had completely forgotten my mother's advice. After filling out the form, Sarah told me the approval process would take about 2 weeks. As I was leaving, she suddenly asked, Mrs. Reed, do you know how to use a smartphone? I shook my head. My old flip phone was a hand-me-down from Michael. It could only make and receive calls. I suggest you get one. It will make it easier to stay in touch, Sarah said with a smile. The community center offers free training classes. A lot of the seniors have learned. That evening, I looked up the cheapest smartphone models online and decided to buy one as soon as the rental assistance came through. The Wednesday craft class was livelier than usual. Linda brought in several small embroidery samples she had made following my instructions, and they looked surprisingly good. Another student, a woman named Wendy, showed off a collection of traditional embroidery pieces she had found in her family's old home in the countryside. Mrs. Reed, is this stitch the one you taught us last time? Wendy asked, pointing to a faded piece. I put on my reading glasses to get a closer look. This is the French knot stitch, a bit more complex than what I taught. I couldn't resist picking up a needle and thread to demonstrate. See, you have to wrap the thread like this. After class, Catherine excitedly told me that the community exhibition was set for the 15th of next month. Your cardinal and dogwood tree will be the main feature, right at the entrance, she said with a smile. And we'd like you to do a live embroidery demonstration. A local TV station might even come to cover it. I was both excited and anxious. Excited that my craft was finally getting recognition, and anxious about how Michael's family would react when they found out. On the way home, I stopped at a phone store and used my saved money to buy the cheapest smartphone available. A young saleswoman patiently taught me the basic operations and helped me download a messaging app. You're a fast learner, ma'am, she complimented me. Just have your kids help you add your frequent contacts when you get home. I smiled sadly and nodded, not telling her that I was buying this phone precisely to get away from my children. It was getting dark when I arrived home. The moment I walked in, I heard Michael roaring in the living room. Find it. Find out where that community center is. What kind of craft class could make my mom go every single week without fail? Something's not right. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly hid the new phone in my bra. Mom, you're back, Jessica spotted me, her face plastered with a fake smile. How was the craft class? It was fine, I answered curtly, trying to slip into my room. Wait, Michael stopped me. Mom, I have to go on a business trip next week, and Jessica has to work overtime. I was hoping you could transfer that money to me first. The company really can't wait any longer. I looked at my son's bloodshot eyes and disheveled hair and felt a pang of pity. But then I remembered Jessica's words about sending me to a nursing home, and my resolve hardened. Michael, it's not that I won't help you. Enough. Michael suddenly exploded, punching the wall. Are you just going to stand there and watch your son lose his job? Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a job right now? If I get laid off, what about the mortgage? The car payments? What about Caleb's schooling? Caleb was woken by the shouting and stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Dad, what's wrong? Seeing my grandson's terrified expression, my heart softened. I'll think about it. Michael clung to my words like a lifeline. Mom, don't worry. I'll consider it a loan. As soon as the company is back on its feet, I'll pay you back with interest. I nodded, made an excuse of being tired, and went back to my room. Closing the door, I collapsed onto the cot, my hands shaking. Michael's mood had shifted too quickly. One moment he was furious, the next he was begging. This wasn't like him. Late that night, I was awakened by a faint noise. Through the crack in the door, I saw the doorknob of my room slowly turning. I held my breath and pretended to be asleep. The door creaked open, and Michael's silhouette appeared. He tiptoed to my bedside and started going through the pockets of my coat. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and pain. This was the son I had worked so hard to raise, now sneaking around like a thief in the middle of the night to rifle through his mother's belongings. Michael didn't find anything and left disappointed. Only after he was gone did I dare to turn over. Tears soaked my pillow. In that moment, my decision was sealed. As soon as the rental assistance was approved, I was moving out. The next morning, before they were awake, I sewed my bank card and ID into another part of the coat's lining. At the breakfast table, Michael was unusually gentle, constantly putting food on my plate. Jessica, for a change, washed the dishes without being asked. Only Caleb looked back and forth between them, confused by the sudden change. After breakfast, I said I was going to the market and went straight to the community center to find Sarah. She told me the subsidy application was in its final review stage and should be approved very soon. "Mrs. Reed, you don't look well. Are you all right?" she asked with concern. I shook my head, not mentioning what had happened last night. But Sarah seemed to guess something. "If you don't feel safe at home, the community has a temporary shelter." "No, I can manage," I said with a weak smile. "But could you possibly check if there's a faster way for me to move?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Well, I have a friend who manages a senior apartment complex. They have vacant rooms available for short-term rental. If you're interested, I can contact them for you." I nodded gratefully. Before I left, Sarah taught me how to take my first selfie with my new phone and helped me set a lock screen password. "To protect your privacy," she said meaningfully. On the way home, I got a call from Catherine. The TV station had heard about the community exhibition and wanted to do a preliminary interview with some of the craftspeople. She asked if I was free tomorrow. I hesitated. "Eleanor, this is a great opportunity," Catherine encouraged me. "Your embroidery is so exquisite, more people should see it." Thinking of Michael's probable reaction, my first instinct was to refuse. But then I thought, why should I continue to live in my son's shadow? "Okay, I'll do it," I heard myself say. After hanging up, I looked up at the sky. The April sun shone gently on my face, like a promise. Whatever lay ahead, at least this time, I was making the decision for myself. The week before the community exhibition, I spent nearly all my time perfecting the cardinal and dogwood tree piece. During the day, while my son's family was out, I would sit on the small balcony, stitching the fine details of the pine needles, one by one. At night, after they were all asleep, I would tiptoe out and turn on a small desk lamp to add the final, soulful touches to the crane's eyes. This piece held so many memories. The cardinal was my late husband's favorite bird. He said its resilience through the harsh winters was like the American spirit. The dogwood blossoms were my final wish for him, that in the next life he would be as free and graceful as a bird. Now, it was about to become a testament to my new life. The day before the exhibition, Sarah called me, her voice filled with excitement. "Mrs. Reed, great news. Your rental assistance has been approved. You can sign the lease any time." My hand trembled, and the needle pricked my index finger. A tiny bead of blood welled up, leaving a faint crimson dot on the pristine white fabric. I quickly tried to rinse it with water, but the red had already seeped into the fibers, impossible to remove completely. "Mrs. Reed, are you still there?" Sarah's voice came through the phone. Yes, I'm here," I said, snapping back to reality. "That's wonderful. What about the apartment?" "It's ready whenever you are. The landlady knows your situation and said you can move in with just the first month's deposit. You can pay the rest when the subsidy check arrives." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my cot, a sense of unreality washing over me. Was I really leaving? Leaving this place I had lived in for 10 years, leaving my son and my grandson. My hand traced the peeling paint on the storage room wall. I knew every crack like the lines on my own palm. That evening, Michael came home early, looking unusually grim. He threw his briefcase onto the sofa with such force that Caleb peeked out from his room, startled. "What's wrong?" Jessica asked, coming out of the kitchen with flour on her hands. "I was laid off." Michael gritted out 3 words. "They announced the list today." Jessica's face went white. "How could they?" "You said." "What I said doesn't matter." Michael slammed his fist on the coffee table. "My boss made it clear. Unless I can bring in that investment, I'm out." His gaze suddenly fell on me, and the mixture of desperation and resentment in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. "Mom," his voice softened abruptly. "Are you really going to watch your son lose his job?" "That money." I looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "Michael, it's not that—" "Enough!" Michael shot up. "I finally see it. You don't have a son in your heart." He stormed out, slamming the door, leaving a deafening silence behind. Jessica gave me a cold glare and pulled Caleb back into the bedroom. I stood there, listening to my grandson's soft sobs, my heart feeling like it was being torn apart. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I quietly got up, took the bank card from the lining of my coat, and pulled out the suitcase I had already packed. My belongings were pitifully few. Some clothes, a few photos, my sewing kit. They all fit into one medium-sized suitcase. Finally, I took out a piece of paper and wrote a long letter to Michael. There were no accusations in the letter, only a recounting of my journey over the years and my decision to leave. When I finished, I placed the letter and the key to my room on the coffee table in the living room. As dawn broke, I called a moving company and scheduled a pickup for 10 o'clock in the morning. Then, for the last time, I made breakfast for my family. Michael's favorite oatmeal, Jessica's preferred avocado toast, and Caleb's beloved sunny-side-up eggs. After I was done, I sat on the balcony and watched the sun rise, illuminating the home I was about to leave forever. At 9 o'clock, I got a call from Catherine. The TV reporter had arrived early and wanted to interview a few of the artisans. "Eleanor, can you come over now? Your piece is so beautiful," the reporter specifically asked to interview you. I glanced at the clock. The movers were an hour away. "Okay, I'll be right there." The community center was bustling. The exhibition hadn't officially opened yet, but staff were busy with last-minute preparations. My cardinal and dogwood tree was displayed in the most prominent spot at the entrance, shimmering under the spotlights. "This is Mrs. Eleanor Reed." Catherine introduced me to a young female reporter. Her embroidery skills have been passed down in her family for over 50 years. The reporter looked at me with surprise. "Mrs. Reed, when did you start learning embroidery?" "When I was 10, I answered softly. "My mother taught me." The interview went surprisingly well. The reporter asked about the meaning behind the piece, and I explained the symbolism of the cardinal and the dogwood in American culture, and before I knew it, I was telling the story of my late husband. When I became emotional, my voice choked up, and the reporter's eyes reddened as well. "You know, Mrs. Reed," the reporter said after the interview, holding my hand, "not only is your craftsmanship superb, but your storytelling is incredibly moving. This segment is sure to resonate with many viewers." I smiled shyly and checked the time. It was 9:50. I quickly said goodbye to Catherine, saying I needed to go back and get something. "Eleanor, don't forget the opening ceremony tomorrow," Catherine called after me. I got home right at 10 o'clock. The young man from the moving company was already downstairs waiting. I asked him to wait a moment while I went up for a final check. The storage room was empty, save for the folding cot and a few old clothes they didn't want. I took a deep breath, picked up my suitcase, and prepared to leave. Just then, the door opened. It was Jessica. She had the day off and had come home early. "Mom, what are you doing?" Her eyes fell on the suitcase in my hand, and her face changed instantly. I froze, not knowing how to explain. Jessica suddenly rushed over and grabbed my wrist. "Are you trying to run away?" "Run away with the money?" "No, I was just—" I struggled to break free, but she held on tight. "Michael, get back here, now. Your mother is trying to run off with the money," she screamed into her phone. Less than 10 minutes later, Michael arrived, his face livid. He snatched the suitcase from me and violently opened it. "Where's the money? Where's the card?" he yelled, rummaging through my things, throwing my clothes everywhere. "It's not in there," I said weakly. "Then where is it?" Michael grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "Mom, are you crazy? I lost my job. Caleb has to go to school, and you're trying to run away with the money?" I looked at his contorted face and suddenly felt no fear. "That is not your money," I said word for word. "It is my retirement fund." "Your retirement fund?" Michael sneered. "You've eaten my food and lived in my house for all these years, and now you're talking about your retirement fund?" Jessica was already on the phone again. Hello, police? I have an old woman here who's trying to abscond with a large sum of money. I stared at her in shock, unable to believe she would go this far. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was the mover, getting impatient. "Who is it?" Michael yelled, going to the door. "Hello, we're from Reliable Movers, here for Mrs. Eleanor Reed." Michael's face turned crimson. "Get out," he yelled at the mover. "Who called you?" The mover, startled, took a step back. "A Mrs. Reed scheduled it yesterday." I seized the opportunity to break free from Jessica and ran to the door. "I called them. I told the mover. Please wait, I'll be right out." "Mom!" Michael grabbed me. "You are not leaving this house today." The scene descended into chaos. The mover stood awkwardly in the doorway. Jessica was still on the phone with the police. Michael was holding onto my arm for dear life, and Caleb, woken by the noise, was crying in the hallway. Just then, my phone rang. It was Sarah Jenkins. "Mrs. Reed, the landlady said you can sign the lease today. Would you like to come over now?" Her voice came through the speakerphone, clear as day. Michael snatched the phone. "Who is this? Are you trying to scam my mother out of her money?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Sarah's firm voice came through. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Reed's son? This is Sarah Jenkins from the Community Senior Services Center. Your mother has applied for the Independent Living Subsidy, and we have an appointment to sign the lease today. If you have any questions, you are welcome to come to the center for clarification." Michael was stunned, clearly not expecting this. I took the opportunity to get my phone back. "Sarah, I'm having a bit of a situation here. Could you possibly come over? The address is..." Half an hour later, Sarah arrived with a community lawyer and a police officer. The police had received Jessica's call, but after understanding the situation, they deemed it a domestic dispute, not a criminal matter. "Mr. Reed," Sarah said sternly, "your mother is a fully competent adult with the right to decide where she lives and how she manages her property. Elder rights laws clearly state that children may not interfere with a senior's freedom to manage their personal assets." Michael's face flushed. "I wasn't trying to interfere. I was just worried she was being scammed." "If that's the case, then you should respect your mother's decision all the more," the lawyer added. "In fact, Mrs. Reed has applied for a legitimate government subsidy program. There is no possibility of a scam." The police officer also tried to mediate. "Son, families should talk things out. It's not a bad thing for your mother to want to live on her own. Why make such a scene?" In the presence of these professionals, I finally got my suitcase and my bank card back. As I was leaving, Caleb suddenly ran over and hugged my legs. "Grandma, are you leaving me?" I knelt down and wiped the tears from his face. "Grandma will always love you. You can come visit me anytime you miss me." I kissed his forehead. "I left my new phone number for you." Michael stood to the side, his expression unreadable. I walked up to him and handed him the key and the letter. "Michael, it's not that I don't love you. I just need a little space of my own." He didn't respond, just stood there rigidly. In the end, it was Sarah who helped me with my suitcase as I left that home under everyone's watchful eyes. Sitting in the car on the way to my new apartment, watching the scenery fly by, the tears finally came. Sarah kindly didn't say anything, just handed me a pack of tissues. My new home was even better than I had imagined. Though it was just a studio, it was filled with sunlight, clean and tidy. The landlady had even prepared a set of basic necessities: a towel, a toothbrush, slippers, and a small potted plant on the windowsill. "What's all this?" I asked, surprised by the thoughtful gesture. "It's a donation from the Community Warm Seniors Project," Sarah said with a smile. "Many kind citizens donate household items to help seniors living independently." I touched the tender green leaves of the plant, and suddenly felt that maybe this new life wasn't as scary as I had imagined. After I was settled, Sarah took me to the community cafeteria for lunch and helped me get acquainted with the neighborhood where the market was, the health clinic, the bus stop. It was evening when I returned to my new home. I sat by the window, watching the sunset, and for the first time, I felt a strange sense of peace. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Catherine. "Eleanor, your interview was on the evening news. Turn on the TV, quick." I fumbled with the old TV the landlady had left and turned it to the local channel. Sure enough, in a special report on traditional culture in the community, My cardinal and dogwood tree was prominently featured. On the screen, I was focused on my embroidery, while the reporter's voiceover said, "With every stitch, these seniors are preserving the cultural fabric of our nation." Watching myself on TV, I suddenly smiled. It turned out that, without the identity of Michael's mom or Caleb's grandma, I could be Mrs. Reed, the embroidery teacher. I could be just Eleanor. On my first morning in the new apartment, I woke to the sound of birds chirping. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on the bed. I lay there for a few seconds, disoriented, before realizing I was no longer in that windowless storage room. The kitchen was empty, but I cheerfully made myself a simple bowl of soup with some greens and a poached egg. As I sat at the small dining table, slowly enjoying my breakfast, I suddenly realized it had been 10 years since I'd had such a leisurely meal. At my son's house, I was always the first one up, busy preparing breakfast for the family. Only after they had eaten and left could I quickly eat whatever was left over. After breakfast, I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy some essentials. Before leaving, I straightened my hair in the mirror and even put on a little lipstick, a small gift Sarah had given me yesterday. "A new life deserves a new look, Mrs. Reed," she had said. The supermarket was bustling. I pushed a cart, slowly selecting items. A lavender-colored towel, a comfortable pair of slippers, a small jar of face cream. These ordinary little things gave me a long-lost sense of autonomy. I didn't have to consider my son's preferences or worry about my daughter-in-law's judgment. I could choose entirely based on my own desires. Passing the kitchenware aisle, a set of blue and white porcelain bowls and plates caught my eye. I hesitated for a moment, then placed them in my cart. At 62 years old, I finally had a set of dishes that was entirely my own. The thought brought a lump to my throat. At the checkout, I took out my new debit card. Sarah had helped me open a new account yesterday where I deposited the $120,000. The thought that this money was now completely under my control made my hand tremble slightly. "Here you are, ma'am," the young cashier said with a smile, handing me the shopping bags. "Thank you," I nodded. And then I noticed her name tag. "Linda. Your name is Linda?" I couldn't help but ask. Yes, the girl's eyes lit up. "Are you a Linda too?" "No, but it's a lovely name," I said. This small, pleasant interaction lifted my spirits. As I left the supermarket, I even found myself humming a tune from my youth. Back home, I enthusiastically set up my new things. The new towel was hung in the bathroom, the slippers placed by the bed. The blue and white porcelain dishes were washed and arranged on the kitchen shelf, glowing warmly in the sunlight. Finally, I took my husband's photo out of my suitcase and placed it gently on the nightstand. "Honey, we have a new home," I whispered, wiping a speck of dust from the frame. For lunch, I made a bowl of soup, served it in one of my new porcelain bowls, and sat by the window to eat. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Grandma?" It was Caleb's voice, choked with tears. "Caleb? What's wrong?" I immediately put down my chopsticks. "Mom and Dad are fighting. Dad is throwing things. I'm scared." In the background, I could hear the sounds of Michael and Jessica arguing, and something shattering. My heart clenched. "Caleb, where are you right now?" In my room." They locked the door. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Listen, sweetheart, lock your bedroom door too. Hide under the covers and don't come out. Grandma's going to call your dad right now, okay?" After hanging up, I immediately dialed Michael's number. It rang for a long time before he answered, his voice thick with anger. "What?" "Michael, Caleb just called me." "He's terrified," I said as calmly as I could. "You can argue, but don't frighten the child." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. "Got it," Michael said curtly, and hung up. I sat there, anxious, and sent Caleb a voice message, telling him Grandma loved him and that he could call me any time he missed me. Only after sending it did I realize my hands were shaking badly. That afternoon, I forced myself to go out to the community center for the craft class. When Catherine saw me, she immediately came over. "Eleanor, after the news segment aired yesterday, we've had so many calls asking about your work." I managed a weak smile, not mentioning the turmoil at home. During the class, I taught a simple pedal stitch, but my mind kept wandering, and I pricked my finger several times. "Mrs. Reed, are you all right?" One of the students, Linda, asked with concern. "I'm fine." "I probably just didn't sleep well last night," I said, shaking my head and continuing my instruction. After the class, Catherine pulled me aside. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" Looking into her sincere eyes, I finally broke down and told her what had happened that morning. Catherine sighed. "This kind of thing is very common. Children get used to relying on their parents. The moment the parent wants independence, they panic and get angry, especially children who are financially dependent. I'm worried about Caleb," I said in a low voice. "But you can't give up your own life because of that," Catherine said firmly. "You've worked hard your whole life. You have the right to enjoy your later years." On the way home, I bought some fruit and cookies, thinking Caleb might come to see me. But my phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. The next day was the opening ceremony for the community exhibition. I woke up early and put on my most presentable outfit, a dark blue, modern-style dress I had bought for my birthday last year, but never had a chance to wear at my son's house. The community center was decorated with lights and banners, bustling with activity. My cardinal and dogwood tree was displayed in a glass case in the center of the hall, with a small plaque beside it. Eleanor Reed, embroidery artisan, over 50 years of experience. "Mrs. Reed, can we get a picture with you?" several students asked, excitedly pulling me over. Under the flashing lights of the cameras, I suddenly felt a sense of disconnect. Was this respected Mrs. Reed really the same person as the old woman who had been accused of stealing by her son and daughter-in-law just yesterday? At the opening ceremony, I was invited to give a speech. Standing at the microphone, looking at the many expectant faces in the audience, I took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming. I started learning embroidery when I was 10 years old. Back then it was to help my family make ends meet." I recounted how my mother had taught me, how I had worked at the factory for 30 years, and how I had kept up the craft to this day. When I spoke of my passion, many of the seniors in the audience were wiping their eyes. Finally, I want to give special thanks to Sarah Jenkins and Catherine Bishop from the community center. My voice wavered slightly. They are the ones who made me understand that no matter how old you are, you can live with dignity and pursue your own dreams. My words were met with a round of thunderous applause. After I stepped down, several strangers came up to shake my hand, saying my story had given them courage. During the lunch break, Sarah quietly told me, "Mrs. Reed, your son was wandering around outside the exhibition hall earlier." I was startled. "He was here?" "Yes, but he didn't come in. He watched for a while and then left." Sarah patted my hand. "Don't worry. He has every right to attend community events." The live embroidery demonstration in the afternoon drew a large crowd. I sat at the demonstration table, demonstrating traditional embroidery techniques stitch by stitch, to the constant murmurs of admiration from the audience. As I was concentrating on a peony blossom, I suddenly felt someone staring at me. I looked up and saw Caleb. He was standing on the edge of the crowd, his eyes red as if he had been crying. "Caleb!" I put down my needle and thread in surprise and waved him over. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked toward me. "Grandma," he said in a small voice, "your embroidery is really beautiful." I hugged my grandson, taking in his familiar boyish scent. "How did you get here?" "Dad brought me. He's waiting outside." My heart tightened. I looked toward the entrance and caught a glimpse of Michael's figure disappearing around the corner. "Grandma, Dad said you don't want us anymore," Caleb mumbled into my shoulder. "Silly boy, how could Grandma not want you?" I kissed his forehead. "Grandma just needs her own little space. You can come visit me anytime you miss me, okay?" Caleb nodded and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "I drew this for you." It was a crayon drawing of 3 people, crookedly drawn, a tall one for Michael, a small one for him, and me in the middle. "Dad said you moved out, so now it's just the 2 of us." Caleb's voice grew smaller. My nose tingled, and just as I was about to speak, Michael walked in. "Caleb, it's time to go," he said curtly, without even looking at me. "Dad, Grandma said she doesn't not want us." Caleb tugged on his father's hand. Only then did Michael glance at me, his expression complicated. "Let's go," he said, pulling Caleb away. "Michael, I called out to him. Do you want my new address? I know it, he said without turning back. It's on file at the community center. Watching them leave, I stood there, the crayon drawing in my hand suddenly feeling incredibly heavy. After the exhibition, my work won the Most Popular Craft Award. Catherine excitedly announced that a cultural products company wanted to collaborate with me to develop a line of traditional embroidery gift items. Eleanor, this is a great money-making opportunity, she said with a laugh. I forced a smile, my thoughts still on Michael and Caleb. Back home, I taped Caleb's drawing to the refrigerator and looked at it for a long time. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Michael. Mom? His voice was a bit hoarse. Can I borrow some money? I was taken aback. Michael, you. I found a new job, but for the first 3 months, the salary is low, and I can barely cover the mortgage and car payments. His voice held a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. Just consider it a loan, please. I was silent for a long time before finally speaking. Michael, Mom can help you, but not by just giving you money. Why don't you come over to my place tomorrow? We can talk in person. After hanging up, I sat by the window, looking at the city lights. I knew that my son's phone call tonight was likely just the beginning. But no matter what, I would never go back to that life without dignity. Michael didn't come the next day. I waited until 8 o'clock at night before sending him a text, only to receive a short reply, busy, another day. I sighed and put away the tea and snacks I had prepared. Maybe he had just asked for money on a whim and gave up when I didn't agree immediately. Or maybe he was still angry and unwilling to set foot in my new home. In any case, I decided not to dwell on it and to continue living my own life. The collaboration on the gift items went smoothly. The head of the cultural products company, a Miss Wang, came to my apartment in person. After seeing my other works, she immediately decided to place an initial order for 50 small embroidered pieces to be sold as high-end gifts. Mrs. Reed, your stitching is so exquisite, Mrs. Wang praised. There are so few people who know this kind of traditional embroidery anymore. The price she offered was astounding. $800 per piece, which meant $40,000 for the 50 pieces. And this is just the first order, Miss Wang said with a smile. If the market response is good, we can have a long-term partnership. After Miss Wang left, I immediately called Sarah to ask for advice on signing a proper contract. With her help, I learned how to open a business bank account and how to register as a small business for tax purposes. These new terms were both nerve-wracking and exciting. Mrs. Reed, you're becoming a business owner, Sarah teased. I laughed shyly. What business owner? I'm just doing some crafting. Don't sell yourself short, Sarah said seriously. Many people would love to have a skill like yours. The following days were busy and fulfilling. I spent my days focused on embroidery and my evenings participating in various community activities, health seminars, senior dance classes, the book club. My world was no longer confined to that small storage room, but had expanded to the entire community and even beyond. Michael called a few more times, always asking to borrow money. I politely declined each time, until one day he showed up at my door. That afternoon, as I was working on a new piece, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Michael standing outside, his face dark. Mom, open up, he said, knocking. I know you're in there. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. Michael came in and immediately looked around, his gaze lingering on my set of blue and white porcelain dishes. Living pretty well, huh? He said, his tone sour. Would you like some tea? I changed the subject, pouring him a cup of green tea. Michael didn't take the cup and sat down directly on the sofa. Mom, I came here today to have a serious talk with you. I put down the teacup and sat across from him. Go on. You've been out for 2 months now, he said, looking directly at me. Do you know what people are saying about me? They're saying I'm ungrateful, that I kicked my own mother out of the house. My heart sank. I've never said anything like that. You didn't have to say it. Your actions speak for themselves, Michael raised his voice. My colleagues at work are whispering behind my back. My boss called me in to ask if I was having family problems. I finally understood the reason for his visit. It wasn't about my well-being, but about his own reputation. Michael, I took a deep breath. If you're worried about that, I can explain to your boss. Explain what? That you have enough money to live on your own but won't help your son? Michael sneered. Mom, do you know how hard things have been for me lately? It took me 3 months to find a new job after being laid off, and the salary is only half of what it was. Jessica argues with me every day. I looked at his tired face and bloodshot eyes and felt a pang of pity. Michael, it's not that I won't help you. Then give me the money, he shot up. I'm entitled to a share of it anyway. I was only 15 when Dad died. Shouldn't I get half of his life insurance? I stared at him in shock. It had been over 20 years, and this was the first time he had ever mentioned his father's life insurance. Michael, that money, don't tell me it was all spent on me, Michael interrupted. I've done the math. There's no way it cost that much. I trembled all over, holding onto the sofa to keep from falling. So, in my son's mind, I had been an evil mother who had embezzled his inheritance all along. Get out, I said, pointing to the door, my voice shaking. This is not the time for this conversation. Michael left in a rage, slamming the door so hard the building seemed to shake. I sank onto the sofa, tears blurring my vision. My phone buzzed. It was a voice message from Caleb. Grandma, Dad, and Mom are fighting again. Can I come over to your place? I wiped my tears and replied, Of course, sweetheart. Do you know the address? Do you want Grandma to come pick you up? Half an hour later, the doorbell rang again. I thought it was Michael, back to continue the argument. I nervously opened the door, only to find Caleb standing there alone, his school backpack on, his eyes red. Grandma, he cried, throwing himself into my arms. I held my grandson, comforting him softly. Through his broken narrative, I learned that Michael and Jessica had been fighting frequently lately, and today it had turned violent, scaring him into running away. I left Dad a note, Caleb sobbed. I made him his favorite mac and cheese and sat with him while he did his homework. That evening, I hesitated about whether to call Michael, but Caleb begged me not to. Grandma, I don't want to go back. They're still fighting. Seeing the fear in his eyes, my heart softened. All right, you can sleep here tonight. I'll take you to school tomorrow and talk to your dad then. I made a makeshift bed for Caleb on the sofa and watched his sleeping face, a whirlwind of emotions inside me. In the middle of the night, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Mom, is Caleb with you? Her voice was choked with tears. Yes. He was scared and came here. That ungrateful. Jessica cursed, then started crying again. Michael, that bastard. He hit me. I was shocked. What? He hit you? Are you hurt? My arm is bruised. That monster. He takes out his unemployment on me, Jessica sobbed. Mom, can I come over to your place? I froze. My daughter-in-law, who had told me to get out just a few months ago, was now asking for refuge in my home. Come, I finally said. Half an hour later, Jessica arrived. There was indeed a large bruise on her right arm. I applied some ointment and poured her a cup of hot water. She held the cup and suddenly broke down, crying uncontrollably. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so awful to you before. I patted her back, not knowing what to say. That night, 3 people slept in my small apartment, my grandson, my daughter-in-law, and me. What a strange combination, I thought. The next morning, after I took Caleb to school, I came back to find Jessica had made breakfast. It was just simple oatmeal and scrambled eggs, but it was probably the first time she had ever cooked for me. Mom, I've made up my mind, she said suddenly. I'm going to divorce Michael. My hand trembled, and my spoon clattered onto the table. Is it that serious? It's not a spur-of-the-moment decision, Jessica said, biting her lip. All these years, I've watched how he treats you. I'm afraid that one day, he'll treat me and Caleb the same way. I was silent. She had a point. A man who could be so cold to his own mother, how well could he treat his wife? What are you going to do? I asked. I'll stay with my parents for a while, she sighed. I'm just worried about Caleb. I can take care of him, I blurted out, then hesitated. But I understand, Jessica said with a sad smile. You finally have a life of your own. I won't push my responsibilities onto you. After Jessica left, I sat by the window in a daze. My phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, is Jessica with you?" His voice was hoarse. "She was, but she's already left," I said calmly. "Michael, hitting a woman is not what a real man does." I was drunk," he stammered. "She's going to take Caleb away from me." "She didn't take him. Caleb stayed with me last night. I've already taken him to school." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Thanks, Mom," Michael finally said, his voice barely a whisper. After hanging up, I suddenly realized it was probably the first time my son had said thank you to me since he was a teenager. The following days were even busier. Besides the embroidery orders, I was also interviewed by a TV station and became something of a local celebrity. Neighbors would greet me when they saw me. "Mrs. Reed, you were on TV again." "Eleanor, is your embroidery class still accepting students?" Meanwhile, Michael and Jessica officially separated. Caleb stayed with Michael for the time being but spent every weekend at my place. Michael would occasionally come to pick up his son but never came inside, just waited at the door. One weekend in June, Caleb excitedly told me, "Grandma, Dad found a new job. The salary is even better than before." I was happy for him but also worried. "That's wonderful. Is he still drinking?" "Nope," Caleb shook his head. "Dad helps me with my homework every night now, and he even cooks for me." That was a surprise. I could hardly imagine the spoiled, rotten Michael I knew cooking in a kitchen. In July, my first batch of embroidered products officially went on sale. They sold out on the Cultural Company's online store in less than a week. Miss Wang called me, excited, saying she wanted to order another 100 pieces and increase the price per unit. "Mrs. Reed, you are a real treasure," she laughed. On the same day, I received my first royalty payment, $68,000 after taxes. I stared at the numbers in the bank notification text, counting the digits over and over to make sure I wasn't mistaken. That evening, I invited Sarah and Catherine over for dinner, serving the dishes I had cooked myself on my blue and white porcelain plates. The three of us middle-aged women raised our glasses in celebration, our laughter filling the entire hallway. "Eleanor, what are your plans next?" Catherine asked. "I'm thinking of taking on a few apprentices," I said after a moment's thought. "To pass on this craft." "That's a wonderful idea," Sarah clapped her hands. "The community center can provide you with a space." Just as we were chatting happily, the doorbell rang. Who could it be at this hour? I wondered, opening the door. I froze. It was Michael, holding a fruit basket. "Mom?" He stood there awkwardly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside to let him in. Seeing Sarah and Catherine, Michael was visibly embarrassed. I didn't know you had guests." He started to leave. Sarah tactfully stood up. "Eleanor, we'll see you tomorrow." After they left, Michael and I sat in silence. He was the first to speak. "Mom, I heard your embroidery sold really well." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "That's great," he said, wringing his hands. I just wanted to come and see you." This son of mine, who used to order me around, was now sitting across from me, looking lost and unsure. I felt a mix of emotions. "Have you eaten?" I asked. "There's still food in the kitchen." "No, I already ate." Michael shook his head, then said suddenly, "Mom, I've started going to Alcoholics Anonymous." I was stunned. "Really?" He looked down. "I've been thinking a lot these past few months, especially after seeing how scared Caleb was." His voice cracked. "I don't want to become like my father." My heart skipped a beat. Michael's father, my late husband, did have a drinking problem, and he would get violent when he was drunk. "Your father, he did change later on," I said softly. "But the damage was already done, wasn't it?" Michael looked up, his eyes red. "Mom, I remember when I was a kid. He would hit you, and I would just—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. As an adult, Michael had, to some extent, repeated his father's behavior, the coldness and harm inflicted upon his family. That night, Michael stayed for a long time. We talked about many things, from his childhood to the difficult years after his father's death, to his marriage and fatherhood. It was the first time in years that we had a real heart-to-heart conversation. As he was leaving, he said suddenly, "Mom, Jessica wants to divorce me." I sighed. I know. I don't want to, he said in a low voice. But I understand. I've disappointed her and Caleb so much these past few months. Everyone makes mistakes, I said. The important thing is to learn from them. Michael nodded and then, unexpectedly, hugged me. The hug was so sudden, yet so natural, that it left me momentarily speechless. "Good night, Mom," he whispered in my ear. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the past few months in my mind. It felt like a lifetime ago. From being kicked out of the house by my grandson, to now having my own career and social circle. From being despised by my son, to him taking the initiative to reconcile. Life is strange sometimes. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, it opens a new door for you. One day in early August, as I was teaching Linda and 2 other students a complex landscape embroidery pattern, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica standing outside with a suitcase. "Mom," she said as soon as I opened the door, "can I stay here for a few days?" I looked at her in surprise. "What's wrong?" "My parents are renovating their house, and the dust is too much." "I'm allergic," she stammered, her eyes darting around. I sighed, knowing that wasn't the whole truth, but I let her in anyway. "The guest room is Caleb's. You can have my room. I'll sleep on the sofa." No, I'll take the sofa," Jessica quickly said. That evening, I made a few simple dishes. During dinner, Jessica suddenly asked, "Mom, how is Michael doing lately?" I glanced at her. "You two haven't been in touch?" "No. Not since we separated," she said, looking down at her rice. "Is he still drinking?" "I heard he quit," I said casually. "I think he even got a promotion." Jessica's eyes lit up for a moment, then quickly dimmed again. Oh, it was only then that I noticed the wedding ring on her left hand was gone. The next day was Saturday, and Caleb came for his weekend visit as usual. He was overjoyed to see his mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he exclaimed, throwing himself into her arms. Jessica hugged him back, her eyes moist. "Mommy missed you." Watching them, I suddenly thought that maybe this unexpected reunion was a good thing. At noon, the doorbell rang again. It was Michael coming to pick up Caleb. He was visibly stunned to see Jessica open the door. What are you doing here?" I came to see Mom," Jessica stammered, her face flushing red. I was in the kitchen, listening to their awkward conversation, and couldn't help but shake my head. These two clearly still cared for each other but were too proud to admit it. Caleb cleverly took both their hands. "Dad, Mom, let's have lunch together." Grandma made beef stew, and just like that, the first family meal after the divorce drama took place, unexpectedly, in my small apartment. At the table, Michael and Jessica barely spoke. Only Caleb chattered away happily about school. After the meal, Michael volunteered to do the dishes, a first in my memory. Jessica cleared the table with practiced ease, as if she were in her own home. I sat on the sofa, watching their busy backs, and had a strange feeling of déjà vu, as if time had rewound 10 years to when they had just gotten married, just as in sync. That afternoon, Caleb had his art class. Michael said he would take him, and Jessica immediately said she would go too. They left, holding Caleb's hand on either side, looking just like any other ordinary couple. After they left, I got a call from Miss Wang. A corporation wanted to order 200 embroidered pieces as business gifts, but they needed them within 2 weeks. "Mrs. Reed, do you think you can take this on? We can double your fee." I calculated the time. It would be nearly impossible to finish, even if I worked day and night. Unless I find some help, I murmured to myself. That evening, Michael and Jessica brought Caleb back together. Seeing me rushing to finish an embroidery piece, Jessica asked curiously, "Mom, is this a new order?" I nodded. "Yes, and it's a rush job. I probably can't finish it in time. Can I help?" Jessica said suddenly. "I did a little cross-stitch in college." I looked at her in surprise. "You'd be willing?" "Well, I don't have much to do lately," she said, looking embarrassed. Michael also came over. I can help organize the materials or something." And so, the 3 of us began a strange family workshop. I taught Jessica the basic stitches, and she learned quickly. Michael was in charge of stretching the fabric on the hoops, sorting the threads, and ironing the finished pieces. Caleb did his homework nearby, occasionally peeking over with curiosity. After a week of working side by side, the ice between Michael and Jessica seemed to slowly melt. They started having simple conversations and would occasionally exchange a smile over something silly Caleb did. I saw it all but never said a word. The day the order was completed, Miss Wang came to pick it up in person. She was impressed by our family's teamwork. "Mrs. Reed, you've got a family business here," she praised. After Miss Wang left, Michael said suddenly, "Mom, Jessica and I want to take you somewhere." "Where?" I asked curiously. "You'll see when we get there," Jessica said with a mysterious smile. They took me to a small meeting room at the community service center. When I pushed open the door, I was surprised to see a middle-aged woman in a business suit sitting inside. In front of her was a sign that read, "Family Counseling." "What is this?" I looked at Michael, confused. "Mom," Michael took a deep breath. "Jessica and I want to try marriage counseling, and we were hoping you would join us." I stared at them, speechless. The counselor, a Miss Davis, smiled and motioned for us to sit down. "Mrs. Reed, your son and daughter-in-law told me that you play a very important role in this family. They hope to repair not just their relationship as a couple, but the entire family dynamic." During the 2-hour session, all three of us cried. For the first time, Michael spoke in detail about his years of resentment toward me, resenting my high expectations, resentful that I always compared him to his father, resentful that I controlled his life. "Mom, do you know why I was so cold to you?" he said, tears streaming down his face. "It was because I always felt that no matter what I did, I could never live up to your expectations." Only then did I understand that my strict demands and silent sacrifices had been perceived as control and pressure by my son. Jessica also confessed that her harshness toward me was partly out of jealousy. "I saw how indifferent Michael was to you, and I thought that was the way to please him," she sobbed, "and then it just became a habit. When it was my turn, I spoke of my years of loneliness and grievances, and when I got to the part about being kicked out of the house by my grandson, Caleb suddenly burst in from outside. He had been hiding in the hallway, listening the whole time. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," he cried, throwing himself into my arms. "I just repeated some mean things I heard from my friends at school. I've regretted it ever since." The four of us hugging and crying together was a scene that made even the professional counselor wipe her eyes. After the first session, Michael suggested we go out for dinner. When ordering, he naturally asked me what I liked to eat. Jessica thoughtfully pulled out a chair for me, and Caleb stuck close to my side, occasionally giving me a kiss on the cheek. On the way home, Michael said suddenly, "Mom, Jessica, and I have decided to give our marriage another chance." Jessica, blushing, added, "But we want to take it slow, starting with weekly family counseling sessions." I nodded in relief. "That's a good idea. Also," Michael hesitated, "we were wondering if we could invite you over for dinner sometimes, or if we could come visit you. Not on a fixed schedule, just whenever it feels right." I understood what he meant. They wanted to rebuild their relationship, but not by reverting to the old dynamic. I smiled and nodded. Of course. That night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window, looking at the starry sky, feeling an immense sense of peace. My husband's photo smiled at me from the nightstand, as if he, too, was pleased with how things had turned out. A year later, my life had changed completely. My embroidery studio officially opened, with 5 apprentices, including Linda and Jessica. Michael and Jessica had reconciled. Though they still had their arguments, they had learned to communicate in a healthier way. Caleb was in middle school and had become my little studio assistant, often helping me organize materials and greet customers on weekends. After my story was reported by the media, it garnered a lot of attention. A publisher asked me to write a memoir, a TV station invited me to be on a cultural program, and a university even asked me to give a lecture on traditional crafts. Every time I was in the spotlight, I made sure to emphasize one point. Seniors are not accessories to their families. They should have their own lives. On my 63rd birthday, Michael's family threw a small party for me. Unlike previous years, which were celebrated with a quick slice of cake in their kitchen, this party was held at my studio, with Sarah, Catherine, Carol, and many other friends in attendance. "Make a wish, Mom," Michael said, bringing over an exquisite cake with 6 large candles and 3 small ones for 63 years. I closed my eyes and made a silent wish that all seniors like me could live with dignity. After I blew out the candles, Caleb mysteriously handed me a gift box. "I made it myself, Grandma." Inside was a beautifully framed piece of embroidery depicting our family of 5, including my late husband holding hands under the sundae. The stitching was a bit clumsy, but it was clearly made with love. "Mom taught me how," Caleb said proudly, "and Dad helped with the design." I was too moved to speak and could only hug my grandson tightly. Michael came over and gently put his arm around my shoulder. "Happy birthday, Mom." In that moment, I suddenly remembered that rainy night a year ago when my grandson had kicked me out of the house. If I hadn't had the courage to leave then, if I hadn't stood my ground, none of this would have happened. After the party, Sarah stayed to help me clean up. "Eleanor," she said with a smile, "you're the star of our community now. You have to be the keynote speaker at next month's Senior Rights Seminar." I gladly accepted. That evening, I sat at my work table and began to write my memoir. I already had a title in mind. At 62, I learned to say no. I was halfway through writing when my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Michael. He, Jessica, and Caleb were at a movie theater, making funny faces at the camera. The caption read, "Mom, it's our turn to host family dinner next week. What do you want to eat?" I smiled and replied, "Anything is fine. I love whatever you make." Putting down the phone, I continued to write. Many seniors ask me if I feel lonely living away from my children. My answer is, loneliness isn't scary. What's scary is feeling lonely when you're surrounded by your own family. Outside my window, a full moon hung high in the sky. My husband's photo watched me quietly from the bookshelf, as if to say, "Eleanor, you did the right thing."